Mother Pikachu watched the egg lying low in a shallow nest at the edge of the woods and grass. Its shell felt warm and was trembling from the wind. She shifted leaves to block a gust, and a thin crack crept along the side. A quick, sharp push came from inside. With one last tremor, the shell split open, and she watched a wet, tiny Pichu. The nest lay at the edge of the trees and the meadow. The Pichu felt exposed. Wind moved through roots and grass and carried sounds far. At night, small hunters came. A common ground rat called Ratata chewed through leaf cover looking for eggs and young. The newborn Pichu was weak and clumsy. It could only twitch and cry. By evening, she felt the weather get worse. Gusts hit the nest edge and leaves whipped across it. Night brought other dangers. She heard Hoothoot call softly from the trees and saw it watch the ground with wide eyes. She pulled the hatchlings closer and flattened herself to block the wind. The noise and cold made the young ones tremble. A short lull came between gusts. The mother pushed a dry leaf aside and exposed a small shelter under a low root. The Pichu saw a tiny seed and the dark shape of an insect. It could not run far. The space was short and hidden enough for one careful move. The young one gathered itself, eyes fixed on the food and on the stem. The hatchling made quick small hops into the leaf litter and used a short soft spark to stun a beetle under a seed. The spark was weak but practical. It loosened the insect from the soil and let the hatchling pull it free. It watched its mother stand upwind, blocking the wind and letting each hatchling move one at a time to the small food patch. She watched the Pichu eat a small meal, and it calmed as its belly filled enough for the night. She heard gusts pass and the call of the Hoothoot drift away without a strike. She kept her guard tight, but for now the nest held. She saw the hatchlings tucked under leaves. The small Pichu knew that dawn would bring more movement and more choices. It saw the ground harden, and it knew the insects would hide deeper. It would have to take longer steps and soon climb low branches. Today, the family stayed together, and the Pichu learned the basics. They sheltered, moved in short bursts, and used sparks carefully. The nest opened onto a bright patch of grass, and Pichu made its first real hop beyond the leaf litter. At the edge where forest met meadow, stems were taller, and places to hide were fewer. Pichu felt the ground change from soft leaves to thin grass that moved under its feet. It heard high, fast wing beats far above. It knew the world was wide. Pichu looked across the open grass. The field gave clear sightlines to any attacker and offered almost no low cover to hide in. Pichu felt small and clumsy in that space. Food lay in small scattered patches of insects and seeds, so each move had to count. When Pichu left a Spearow patrolled the corridor above the meadow. It made fast diving passes and tested the new runners. Pichu felt the wings cut the air. Pichu watched the siblings freeze and then scatter toward the nearest clumps of grass. Food was thin and spread out, so stopping to eat kept them longer in the open. Each step, Pichu saw a pattern. A Spearow dove from a certain angle and took longer to recover after a sharp startle. Pichu noticed low branches and tangled roots at the meadow edge that let it break a straight line of sight. It learned that a quick soft spark could blink in the air, make insects jump. Pichu moved in short, low sprints from one patch of cover to the next, stayed close to the low plants and climbed the first reachable branch to change direction, gave brief electric sparks to push insects into reach, flashed a spark at a bird on a close pass and watched the bird pull away, kept its moves short and practical. Dart. Pichu followed the new pattern and it worked well enough to find food. He reached an insect patch, startled the insects with a spark, and slipped back under the roots while a Spearow circled wide. He watched his siblings copy the short runs and climbs. He noticed the group stayed together instead of spreading thin. By evening their bellies were fuller and his nerves were frayed. Afternoon light slanted through the trees as Pichu practiced quick climbs and controlled sparks. He knew his speed and timing had to improve with each step. The meadow still held wind and the sound of wings. Every bite of food reminded him that open ground required constant care. Pichu stood at the edge of a long meadow corridor and felt the air change. The path ahead was open and sparsely covered. It was a clear lane for travel and also exposed to eyes from above. He had crossed short gaps before, but today the runs felt longer and his breathing grew faster. The low canopy gave some cover, but sunlight came through the leaves in strips and made movement easier to see. He did not know what waited past the next hedgerow. He only knew this stretch would test how far he could go before he had to change how he acted. Pichu saw the danger clearly. Big flyers patrolled the air above the corridors. A Pidgeotto circled once, scanning the grass and low branches with sharp eyes. Pichu knew that open ground offered few places to hide and almost no sudden turns to break a dive. There were food pockets beyond the clearings, but to reach them Pichu had to cross long open strips, where one fast strike could end a foraging run. Each crossing now carried a risk that had been small before. The pressure grew as distance from home increased. Runs that had been a few short hops now became many hops. The undergrowth thinned, and Pichu could not dart between roots as often. His legs burned sooner. He used brief sparks to flush insects, and his cheeks warmed from them. His siblings began to spread out. They chased thin patches of insects and left longer gaps between safe spots. Evening trips used more energy, and filling his belly took longer. He understood the result. The farther he went, the more energy he burned, and the more patrols he met. Pichu noticed a small change, steady and mechanical. His feet took a firmer hold on low branches, and the bases of his ears felt heavier. Movements that had been clumsy grew more deliberate. When he paused, his chest beat more deeply, and he felt a faint tingling in his cheeks after a spark. These were small shifts, but they changed what he could do. He could reach farther, use branches, and make longer bounds instead of only running on the ground. He noticed the change as a clear physical shift. After a series of hard runs and repeated strain, he felt his body reshape. His frame lengthened, his limbs thickened, his ears and the base of his tail altered, and his cheek pouches swelled with new capacity. The change finished in a few focused minutes and left him larger and more balanced. He realized he had become Pikachu. His muscles were stronger for longer bounds, his footing steadier on thin branches, and he could store more charge for brief powerful discharges to startle threats at close range. The change was immediate. Pikachu moved between shrubs as a Pidgeotto flew low over the meadow. He could not outrun the bird, but he did not need to. Pikachu dropped to a lower branch, sent a sharp controlled spark into the air, and made a quick sideways hop into denser cover. The bird flinched at the unexpected spark and turned away. Pikachu reached the insect patch beyond with less effort than the same run would have taken when he was a Pichu. He noticed the world had not become safe. It had only changed the terms. Pikachu now had more reach and different weaknesses. Corridors ran farther than before, and patrols moved in new ways. He could hear shifts in their routes and see gaps he still had to cross. He had solved this moment by growing, but each successful crossing showed more terrain to learn and more patrol patterns to watch. Each success pushed him toward wider ranges and a new phase of life he expected to face. Pikachu moved through the low trees and shrubs with quick, deliberate hops. This area lay between the dense woods and the open meadow. The wind carried smells from both places and a sense of danger. A large bird flew overhead, and its shadow fell across the path. Pikachu felt the air tighten and stopped, alert. He listened and looked along the tree line, ready to change direction immediately. Pikachu saw the problem clearly. Larger aerial predators hunted along the same corridors where he foraged. He watched open strips of meadow that gave a pharaoh a long, straight airspace to race after a running small mammal or a small bird. Those same openings left him exposed when he crossed between shrubs and low branches. He knew a miss could mean a broken limb or worse. He moved with more care and stayed close to cover when he could. Pressure rose as direct dives became more common. Pikachu saw Fiero circle higher, then fold its wings and drop faster than Pikachu could run in the open. Each chase used up energy and left Pikachu breathing hard behind the next bush. Good feeding spots were scarce now. Staying in the open longer made it easier for Fiero to spot Pikachu on a straight run. Pikachu noticed a small shift that changed the odds. He learned to read wing sounds and gusts of wind. When the wind moved out of the trees, he heard talon noise become muffled and saw a line of low branches open that cut across the meadow. The branch route gave him cover and a shorter, less visible path to the next insect patch. Pikachu adapted by moving faster side to side. It hopped quickly between branches and used short, focused electric shocks. Instead of sprinting straight, it ran sideways into the shrubs, bounced onto a low branch, and sent a sharp spark into the air near the approaching Fiero. The spark did not wound the bird. Pikachu saw it flinch and break the strike pattern of the Fiero. The pause gave Pikachu enough seconds to reach dense cover. Pikachu saw the tactic work for now. Fiero stopped its dive and climbed back up. Pikachu stayed tucked in the thicket leaves, panting and unhurt. It checked its cheek pouches to see if it still had charge, fed briefly on an insect that had landed nearby, and stayed still to save energy. The move lowered the immediate risk and let Pikachu keep foraging, but it knew every action still needed careful timing. Pikachu watched the landscape change as light moved and the wind shifted. He expected the raptor to return, or another to patrol the corridor. He padded along higher branches when the air felt thin and practiced short sparks and sideways runs. He had learned a rhythm to survive here. He waited to see if the next moment would test that rhythm. The ridge opened wider than before, and Pikachu felt it in his legs. For weeks his daily route had stretched into long crossings of meadow and low forest. Food was no longer a few hops away. Each run left him breathing harder and moving slower. He noticed a tightness along his shoulders and a dull ache under his fur. He understood the ridge required more strength than he had built so far, and that his body was changing sooner than he expected. Pikachu saw that food patches were sparse and farther apart. He spent more time searching than eating. Where insects had once been common, he found only scattered seed heads and dry beetle carcasses. The long days on the move burned energy faster than the small snacks could replace. He learned to judge wind and scent to find buried roots. Each extra step raised the risk of tiring his muscles and losing the fight for a patch before he reached it. One morning, Pikachu saw a Raticate running along the meadow corridor. It was a heavy competitor, fast at shoveling seeds and digging at roots. Pikachu arrived at a shallow cluster of tubers, and the Raticate was already there, digging with blunt paws. The Raticate snapped its teeth and pushed him off the richest spot. Pikachu sent a small spark to try to frighten it, but the spark felt thin and short. He stepped back with empty cheek pouches, his heart pounding, and the ridge wind took warmth from his wet fur. The encounter left him with less food, and he understood that his current strength would not hold against larger ground rivals. After the loss, Pikachu changed his routine bit by bit. He tried low ridgeline roots and harder seed pods he had avoided before. He perched longer on thick branches to rest between runs. Sometimes his fur prickled and his cheeks tingled in a way he had not felt before. He felt the tingling come from deeper under his skin, and it made his movements steadier. He could feel a new balance under his feet. The small shifts seemed minor, but they added up and led to a larger change. The change came as a physical surge. His muscles tightened and widened. His legs grew heavier, and his tail stub lengthened into a broader, stronger form. His cheek pouches swelled. The electrical current under his skin moved deeper and slower. Pain and fatigue pushed through him, then subsided. When it ended, he moved in longer, more forceful bounds. He could run farther without wheezing, and could release a sustained electrical pulse strong enough to crack open thick seed pods. The new body let him reach distant patches and defend them with a force he had lacked as Pikachu. He took a long route to test the change. He crossed 2 ridgelines and came back with his cheek pouches full of seeds. He kept a steadier pace on the rough ground. His footpads took the knocks and did not bleed. A gust rolled over the meadow, and he braced so he did not slip. He gave a short, deep discharge to pry up a buried tuber. He ate until the ache in his flanks eased. For now, his larger body made empty stretches into reachable food sources. The ridge grew quiet as clouds moved in from the highlands, and the smell of rain reached the meadow. Raichu felt stronger, but he also felt the map of his world stretch farther ahead. New routes waited along distant ridgelines, and larger competitors still roamed the low woods. He stepped forward on a worn trail, his heavy tail marking the ground, aware that the gains he had made this season would soon meet the next challenge. Raichu moved along the high ridge in steady, long strides. The open meadow below offered few places to hide. The air grew warmer, and he noticed the sharp smell of another predator. He understood that a long chase could start here. He tightened his muscles and watched the horizon. He moved across wide open ground, and new apex hunters could see him from far away, and would have time to start a long chase. The ridge let him move faster and gave him sight of the plain, but it also gave an attacker room to run. He saw only scattered trees and low rock outcrops, so there were few quick places to shelter when danger came. Every exposed run increased the chance of a tiring pursuit and of a bad fall. Raichu felt the wind pick up and carry scent across the meadow. In the distance he heard heavy, fast steps. He recognized them as an Arcanine on the prowl. The Arcanine closed fast and forced him into straight runs where his stamina mattered most. Each sprint cost energy. Each leap risked slipping on loose ground. The ridge narrowed and cover thinned. He had less time to act. Raichu shifted toward a line of broken boulders and a shallow stand of trees. He kept low and used the rise of a rock to change his path. His tail bristled and his cheek pouches tightened as he tested his charge. The terrain gave him a new option. It did not hide him completely, but it offered places to shorten the chase and force the attacker to break. He used long leaps between rocks and low branches to break the straight line the Arcanine needed. Between bounds, he sent steady electric pulses into the ground and into the air around the predator. He heard the shocks snap and saw the Arcanine flinch. The shocks were precise and enough to startle and slow the animal without wasting all his charge. He moved uphill where the footing was firmer and into thicker grass to break scent and sight. Raichu watched the Arcanine hesitate after the shocks and its clumsy landings on the rocks. The Arcanine slowed and broke off, moving back toward the open meadow. Raichu stood breathing hard. His muscles stayed ready to run. His limbs ached, but the pulses in his chest had held. From his place on the ridge, he saw the distance grow and understood that his electric pattern and the ridge had given him space for now. Raichu did not stay long in one place. The landscape changed with the seasons, and each wide run tested his limits again. He moved down from the ridge along a worn trail of seeds and insect patches, already plotting routes that mixed open ground with shelter. Ahead, a distant ridge caught the last light, and he understood there would be another stretch of land and another set of risks.